Right. Morning, everyone.
Morning.
I am going to read a short passage from Acts chapter 9, from verse 32 to the end of the chapter. So that's Acts chapter 9, verse 32 to the end of the chapter. Now it came about that as Peter was travelling through all these parts, he came down also to the saints who lived in Lydia. And there he found a certain man named Aeneas, who had been bedridden 8 years, for he was paralyzed. And Peter said to him, Aeneas, Jesus Christ heals you. Arise and make your bed. And immediately he arose. And all who lived at Lydia and Sharon saw him, and they turned to the Lord. Now in Joppa there was a certain disciple named Tabitha, which translated in Greek called Dorcas. This woman was abounding with deeds and kindness and charity, which she continually did. And it came about at that time that she fell sick and died. And when they had washed her body, they laid it in an upper room. And since Lydia was there, was near Joppa, the disciples, having heard that Peter was there, sent 2 men to him, entreating him, Do not delay to come to us. And Peter arose and went with them. And when he had come, they brought him into the upper room, and all widows stood beside him weeping, showing all the tunics and garments that Dorcas had used to make while she was with them. But Peter sent them all out, and knelt down and prayed, and turned to the body. He said, Tabitha, arise. And she opened her eyes, and when she saw Peter, she sat up. And he gave her his hand and raised her up, and calling the saints and widows, he presented her alive, and became known all over Joppa, and many believed in the Lord. And it came about that he stayed many days in Joppa with a certain tanner, Simon. So here we have a situation where Peter is in a nearby town, and God has used him to heal a man. Meanwhile, in this other town, this lady called Tabitha, now you'll notice how I pronounced that. I have recently discovered I've been mispronouncing it all my life, and now I pronounce it the right way. I wonder where I learned that, because it's translated into Dorcas. Anyway, she was greatly used of the Lord. She supported the widows by making garments for them, which I'm sure they all greatly appreciated. But I'm sure there was much more to what she did than just making of the garments. I'm sure she testified of her own experience of the Lord. But anyway, she became ill and she died. Of course, there was great grieving, because this woman who had been so influential in the church, a great supporter, was no longer there to do the work that she had been doing. And then somehow the church finds out Peter's in a nearby town, let's send for him. Now I wonder what they expected, because we're not told what they expected. Perhaps he just thought, well, Peter's one of the big leaders in the church, let's get him to come here and he can share in our grieving for us. And he can communicate to the wider church that this lady has died, let's pray for her family. Or perhaps they were expecting a miracle. We don't know. I suppose they would be familiar with the story of how Jesus raised from the dead, and they may well have thought, perhaps Peter will be used of the Lord to raise her from the dead. But we don't know that. But we do know that they sent 2 men who entreated Peter, come quickly with us, and he did. He didn't hang around. And when he got there, it seems to me that they spent some time talking to him, because we're told that the widows showed him the garments that Dorcas had made. Well, that would take a bit of time, and they probably told all sorts of stories about her kindness to them, and how she'd greatly supported them, and that she was sorely missed, and they would tell him how much they really loved her. Because that's what it seems to me. They They just didn't treat her like a charity worker. They really loved this woman. And that tells me that she loved them. The sort of people you generally love are the people that love you back. I think she showed a great deal of love to them first, and they in turn loved her in return. And she wasn't a great leader in the church. She wasn't a great preacher. But she was a disciple of the Lord who simply got on with the task that she'd been given to do. And that made her influential, especially amongst the poor. God often uses the simplest of gifts. Making clothes. I expect many ladies were able to sew clothes and make them, but she used her gift to reach out to other people, making clothes. And I'm sure that as she did so, as she gave them the clothes, she would talk to them and tell them about Jesus. And they in turn would become followers of the Lord, and I show their appreciation to her. Anyway, Peter arrives. And having listened to all these stories and seen all the garments, he then tells everyone to get out of the room. Now, Jesus used to do that. Sometimes he'd be shown into a room where there'd be a body or whatever, and he would tell people, leave the room. He wouldn't tell them, I'm going to do something. He would tell them to leave the room. And I wonder, did Peter do that because he'd seen the Lord do that? I don't know, but that's what it reminds me of. That's the sort of thing Jesus did. You're not going to have a great big piece of entertainment here. Get out. This is going to be serious business between the Lord and me. And what did he do? He prayed. We're not told how long he prayed for. We just know that he was alone in the room with the body. And there came a point in the prayer where he said, Tabitha, arise. And she opened her eyes. And she sat up and saw him. And he, being a gentleman, held out his hand and helped her to get up. And then he presented her to the church, alive and well. I would think there'd be great rejoicing. But I think there's a bit more to the story than that, because we are then told that many believed. This story went out. And the way I see it is this. Dorcas had a ministry already. Her ministry was making clothes for the poor, talking to them, communicating Christ to them. That was her ministry. And I expect that she wasn't really expecting any more than that. She was simply faithful to the Lord and getting on with what she'd been tasked to do. But this incident expanded the ministry, because this went out all over the town. Now, we're not told exactly how it went about, but it probably went in two ways. Word of mouth. We were there, Our friend died. We sent for this man called Peter, who's a follower of the Lord. He told us to get out of the room, and the next thing we know is he comes back out the room with her, and she's alive and well. And what are you going to do if you hear a story like that? You're going to want to hear this straight from the horse's mouth and meet this woman. Probably. So I think an awful lot of them heard it straight from her. They'd come and hear what she had to say, because after all, she's the number one witness. This happened to me. And many believed, not just one or two, many believed. And we're also told that when Peter was in the other town, many believed because of the miracle that's performed there. In both cases, it's an extension of the ministry. many believed. It wasn't just a load of gossip. And I wonder how many of us would want to emulate Dorcas. Now, we might not be good at making clothes. Please don't come to me and ask me to do any sewing for you, because you will be bitterly disappointed in the results. But sometimes God has given us a natural gift, or something that you've learned perhaps when you're young, and you learn how to use it in a way that benefits the ministry. There have been some people in OM who have had the ability to dance. I couldn't enter that ministry. But there are some people who, through dance, for example, have brought other people in order to be witnesses. It could be anything at all. We've had people who've come in with sport and benefited from that. All sorts of things. I'm looking at such a person. You get a paintbrush, you see, and you get some paint and do some painting, but that can become a ministry. The key thing is this. It's not necessarily what you do, because it could be anything at all. The key thing is faithfulness. Getting on with it all the time. Because this passage makes it clear that Dorcas didn't just make garments once or twice. She was doing it all the time, always with the widows, always communicating with them, always seeking to minister to them. This was the mark of her life. She was someone that they looked up to as their friend, and someone who above all loved them. And they wouldn't have been the sort of people that society would have looked up to. They were poor and dependent, and nobody would be interested in them outside of the church. They were just people who were left bereft and thought, well, you have to get on with it. You're widowed, you're poor, tough. We don't love you. But in the church, they were loved. They were valued. In our faithfulness, we need to value people. Valued for the fact that they are human beings that God is redeeming or has redeemed, not valued for what they can do. That'll come later. But sometimes God might expand our ministry in ways that we don't expect. I'm sure she didn't start at the beginning of her ministry thinking, well, one day I'm going to die and be raised from the dead, and then I'll expand the ministry. That wouldn't be in the plan at all. I'm glad that God doesn't always reveal his full plan to us, because otherwise we'd balk at it. She was simply getting on with what was her everyday life of loving people. I wonder, are we like that? Have you ever met anyone who you look at them and you think, I want to be just like them. I don't want to be them, I still want to be me, but I want what they've got. Because whatever it is, it's amazing, I appreciate it, and I want that as well. I want to emulate them. I've had a number of people like that. People that loved me, ministered to me, and I thought, I want to be able to love people like you do. That's it. I want to love people the way you do. And so you get close to these people. You usually don't say to them, by the way, I want to be just like you. Because I never said that to any of them. But I just got on with the business of, allowing myself to be ministered to by them. And there comes a point, in my experience anyway, and I'm thinking of one of them in particular, where you minister back to them. One of those people, and some of you may have met him at the wedding, is my former pastor, Gordon. He ministered to me, and believe me, I needed a lot of ministering too. Lots and lots of it. He was very patient and put up with me. And then I've told some of you this story many times, so forgive me for telling you it again, but to those who never heard it, pin back your ears. There was a young man, and we in the church had what we called a midweek service, and it was also a prayer meeting. And he would preach at it, and then this would be followed by prayer. And one day he came to me and he said, I want you to preach at the midweek service. You, and he named a couple of other young men, and he said, the three of you are going to take the service. I'd never done anything like that in my life before. I had no idea if I was going to be able to stand out in front of these people, open up the Bible and tell them, here's this passage, here's what it means. I'd never done that before. But because he made me do it, I found out I can do it. And then he kept on asking me to do it. And he expressed to me after some time, he said, it's nice for me to be able to sit down and just be ministered to. And I thought, wow, sometimes I minister to him. It's a two-way thing. I'm sure that as Dorcas made her garments and ministered to people, they in turn ministered to her in expression of their love to her. And of course, when you become a Christian, you're a poor widow, you're going to tell other widows about this. And ministry could be extended in ways that we have not planned. But God has planned it. It's just that he hasn't told us about it until it happens. And I often wonder, when Peter was praying, what was he expecting? Did he have an inner prompting when he suddenly turned round and said, Tabitha, arise? We don't know. But again, Peter was a faithful man. He was ministering to the church. He came straight away. He didn't hang about. He loved people. Now, we know he had his faults. But people believed this story, and many came to a saving knowledge of Jesus Christ. And we know that one of those people who obviously heard this story, and I suspect that he heard it from Peter, was the Apostle Paul. Because we are reading it in the book of Acts. And who wrote the book of Acts? So that's why I believe Paul heard this story. He believed it and he recorded it. And that lady, Tabitha, Dorcas, could never have imagined that apart from the fact that lots of people in the town heard her testimony and believed it, a couple of thousand years later, we're still hearing this testimony. And there are people who are still believing it and still being influenced by it. In that respect, the ministry goes on. Her testimony is still there for us to read. And for us to experience our own love from the Lord. Perhaps you in turn have met a Dorcas, and it's because of that, your Dorcas, that you're here now. Faithfulness is a mighty gift from the Lord. We need to practice it every day and work hard at it. I think faithfulness needs to be worked at. I'm very sorry to say that in recent days I read about people who once followed the Lord and have now publicly said, "Oh, I don't now anymore because of this, that and the next thing." You wonder, what did they believe in the first place then? What did they really trust in? We need to trust in the real Jesus Christ. Not one of our imagination, not our church, not our pastor, but in the real Jesus Christ. Dorcas did. It is because of that that she ministered to widows. The church was told to look after the poor. So she did it in abundance. But she wasn't someone who was a mighty leader. She was just somebody who loved people. If you don't love people, guess what? You'll be useless. If you think that you can be in a position of influence in the church and you don't love people, guess what? You will be a liability. This woman was an asset. She poured. And also too, I sometimes notice in the Bible things that are not said. And one of the things that's not said in this passage is there's no mention whatsoever of her ever having children gathering around because her mother had died. So the assumption is she didn't have any. And she might not have been a married woman, and we don't know what age she was either. But the church loved her. That was her family. The widows loved her. They were her family. They grieved deeply. So they must have been rejoicing when she was risen from the dead. Let's look to the Lord all the more in faithfulness. You never know what opportunities He's going to bring your way. You never know who you're influencing, by the way, too. You might be a Dorcas to someone else and you don't know it because they're watching you carefully and thinking, I want to be just like him, or I want to be just like her. I want some of the attributes, the sheer love and determination and faithfulness they've got, and use it in my own life for me to be used of the Lord just like they are. Amen.